Hi everyone, I'm Gertie from Charm Patterns, and I just released a new sewing book called Gertie Sews Glam Knits. It has 6 interchangeable patterns, and today I'm going to show you how to sew the jewel neck top. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you all the pattern pieces, and I've minimized them down so we can look at them all together. And I find that this is just really helpful in showing you how the pattern comes together. So there are 4 main pattern pieces for this design, and 2 of them are the same piece here because for the A through double D cup sizes, you will cut a different piece that does not have a bust dart. For F through H cups, you are going to cut the piece with a dart. We found that that helps you get a better fit in the larger cup sizes to have a dart. So then you have your bodice back, sleeve, and neckband. So I'm going to talk you through each of these pieces. For the jewel neck top front, you're going to cut 1 on the fold. And let's see, you have notches at your arm side seam, and waistline. If you're going to be making the full length top, you would cut here. If you would like to interchange this top with other patterns from the book, like maybe the pencil skirt to make a little sheath dress, you're gonna cut along the waistline and tape it together at the waistline mark on the pencil skirt, okay? Don't worry about the seam allowance, just tape those 2 pieces together on the line. You'll see you have what looks like a grain line here. This is actually, for knits, you don't have a grain line, you have what's called the dogs, or the direction of greatest stretch. So I want you to feel your fabric, feel which direction it stretches the most in, and the stretch should go in that direction. And that's just because we want the stretch to go around the body, okay? Not up and down for this design. All right, for our top back, again, you're gonna cut 1 on the fold, waistline mark, same deal, side seam notch, arm side notches. You're just gonna do little snips at those, all right? That's really important. You're gonna want those later on. And then you have your sleeve. Again, the direction of greatest stretch goes across the arm here. And you have 3 little sets of notches here. This one is for the shoulder seam. This is your bodice front. Single notch matches up. Bodice back always has 2 notches, which matches to your back arm side. And then finally, we have our neckband. I'm really excited to show you how the neckband goes on because this is a foundational knits skill. You're gonna cut 1. This gets folded in half along that lengthwise line. And these notches are also important. This one is for the center front of the neckline. We have 2 for the shoulder seams, and then it gets seamed at center back. So that's it. Those are all your pattern pieces. Next, we're gonna talk about fabric and supplies. Now we're going to talk about fabric and supplies. I feel like with knits, people are often intimidated by what fabric to use and knowing the difference between the different types of knits. But the most important thing to understand is stretch percentage. And there's a great chapter in the book about this, talking about stretch percentage, and we even have a chart that that's to scale that you can stretch your fabric against to figure out what the stretch percentage is. But today I'm going to show you how to do it just against a ruler. Okay, so here are 6 types of knit fabric. All of them are ones that I would recommend for this top. For the samples in the book and for every single test that we did in the muslin stage, we used ITY, which stands for Interlock Twist Yarn, which I didn't know until we did this book. But it is a very drapey, that's what my top is made out of, very drapey, kind of resembles a silk jersey, right? So it has a vintage glam feel to me. So this fabric is great for this top. You can see it has a nice amount of stretch to it. What we're asking for this top, what we're recommending is that you choose something that has between 50 and 70% widthwise stretch around the body, okay? So the way that you would figure that out is you're gonna grab your fabric, you're gonna find 4 inches of it here, and you're gonna stretch it as far as it would go. So if it goes to 6 inches, that is 50%. And then you don't want it to go any further than 7. Math is hard. Okay, so this is sort of the maximum for this top. All right, and then the lengthwise, the other direction stretch, you're looking for minimal stretch. It shouldn't be as much as the around the body stretch. So no to very little lengthwise stretch. But the great thing is, because there are so many knits out there and you may have some in your stash you want to use, you can make fit adjustments if you have more or less than the recommended amount of stretch. If your fabric has less, that means that your top is going to fit tighter than recommended. So you may just want to size up. If your fabric has more stretch, vice versa, you may want to size down because it's going to be baggy. All right, so you can make those adjustments and you'll learn, the more knits you sew, the more you'll get a feel for it. So something like a matte jersey, ITY, has a great amount of drape and is going to look amazing in this top. I also love the idea of this being like a little sweater girl top. So anything like a cable knit, sweater knit, this would be great. This has a little less stretch, so I would probably size up for this fabric. Of course, we love leopard print. This is a nice rib spandex. This would be a nice little t-shirt vibe for this shirt. Pointel is such a beautiful fabric, and again, this would give it like a sweater feel. I made one of the samples in the book in this fabric. This is a cashmere sweater knit. This is like if you really want to elevate this to a luxury item. Cashmere knit is a really beautiful fabric, so soft, and you don't need it's gonna be expensive, but you don't need a ton of it for this pattern. And then finally, if you're looking for something just sort of basic and simple to sew with, a cotton jersey is a great choice. It will give you a t-shirt feel and it's less slippery than some other knits. So if you're a beginner with knits, you may find this a little easier to work with. Okay, so that is your cotton jersey. Aside from fabrics, if you're making this into a dress, you're going to want some clear elastic that's 1/4 inch wide to stabilize the waistline. You can also use this clear elastic for anywhere in a garment that you're worried about stretching out over time, like shoulder seams. So I'm going to show you today how to apply this to the shoulder seams so that you understand that technique. For your sewing machine needle, you're going to want a stretch or jersey needle in a size to match your fabric. So having stretch jersey needles in sizes 80-12, 70-10, that's going to be a great match for these fabrics. And then finally, the thread, you're just going to use your all-purpose polyester thread, which is a really good match for any of these knit fabrics. We use Metler Metrocene, and that's a great choice for knits. All right, so now we're going to get started sewing. Okay, we are ready to get sewing. So the first thing I want you to do is before you take your pattern pieces off of your fabric, on your top front and your top back, which were both cut on the fold, you are going to take a little pair of scissors and at the center front on your fabric only, right on the fold, you're gonna make a tiny notch. So it shouldn't be more than 1/4 inch. Okay, and this is going to help us match up the neckband when we get to that step. So same thing on the back, just putting my scissors in between the layers there and making a little notch just under 1/4 inch. Okay, and another thing that I would recommend doing, especially with ITY, if you're using ITY, it can be really hard to tell the front from the back of the fabric or the right from the wrong side. So I always cut with my fabric right sides together. So that means that this would be my wrong side, this would be my wrong side. So I'm just going to make an X in a corner. And this is a water-soluble ink pen. So I'm going to do that on my sleeve pieces. My top front, I'm not so worried about because I've marked the darts on the wrong side, so that will help me there. I'm going to do that on my top back, and I'm going to do that on my neckband, though there's a fold marked on my neckband in chalk paper, so again, not so worried about that one, but better safe than sorry. Okay, so now we can remove our pattern pieces from our fabric. And we're going to be concentrating on the top front. And this is for the F through H cups only, this particular step. We are going to be sewing the darts. So the A through double D cups do not have the bust dart. So if you're sewing those cup sizes, you can skip to the next chapter. All right, so we are going to take our top and we're going to put right sides together. I'm working from the wrong side here. And we're going to fold those darts so that the dart lines that you marked are aligning top to bottom. So the way I check on that is I take a pin and I put it through the dart line. I check that it's aligned on the bottom. And if it's not, then you just kind of wiggle the layers around a little bit like that I need to do here until they're aligned. Okay, so there's one dart pinned. I'll do the other one off camera. Now we're at our sewing machine. I have a stretch needle in here. I'm going to be using a straight stitch on my darts. With knits, I think that it's fine to do a straight stitch for your darts, but then I use a zigzag for seams and hems. Okay, because the darts don't need to stretch as much as the seams. So we're gonna start at the edge of the fabric. We're leaving some tails here, but we're back stitching here. And then we're just stitching along the marked lines. Ooh, look how my nails match. Stitching along the marked lines until we get to that very point. And then we're going to just very gradually ease off the fabric here. Don't kind of swerve off, just your last couple stitches should be right on the edge of the fabric. Okay, we're not going to back stitch here. We're going to leave a couple inches of thread. We're going to tie this off by hand, and the reason for that is you don't want to get any back stitching at the point of a dart can cause some little puckers, and we certainly don't want that, especially around the bust area. Okay, so I'm trimming my threads here after knotting. And we're going to press this down. A lot of people say you don't have to press knits at all, but I do feel like it gives you a nicer finish. ITY can kind of like pucker up a little bit when you sew it, especially on hems. So giving it a little press will just kind of set those seams and make your stitches look nicer. So darts get pressed down. There we go. Okay, so I used a ham for this. That's just a pressing tool. Mine happens to have cats on it. A pressing tool that helps you press rounded areas. So here's my dart from the right side. And I'm going to do the other one off camera. And then we're going to come back and we'll be ready to do our shoulder seams. Okay, so here's my top front. My darts are sewn. You can see here's my little clip at the center front of the neckline. And now I'm going to put the top front right sides together with the top back. And oh, this bled through, so wow, my smart plan, not so smart. Okay, so maybe chalk would have been better. Let's see, this is, you can also tell just by looking at a fabric what's the right and wrong side, but you have to be really careful. This would be the right side. Okay, right sides together. We are going to match the shoulder seams and pin right sides together. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that with the pen. Learn from my mistakes, everyone. Okay, so we are sewing these right sides together. Okay, so now we're going to move to a zigzag. For seams, I like to do a zigzag that's 2.5 wide by 2.5 long. And this will help our seams stretch so that when you put your top on, take it off, etc., you will not bust your seams. I'm sewing at 5/8 of an inch. There's one. Let's do the other. And there we go. And as you can see, that zigzag stitch stretches a little, which is great. The next thing we're going to do is stabilize our shoulder seams with clear elastic. This is an optional step, but it really helps keep your top looking great wear after wear. So clear elastic looks like this. It's used in knit sewing, in swimwear, etc. So the way we're going to do this is we are going to stitch it right next to our seam line. So I'm going to pin just the beginning here, and I like to do it so that the edge of the clear elastic is just aligning with your zigzag stitch. And you don't have to pin the whole thing, just pin the beginning, and then I'm just going to trim it like so. And now we're going to stitch it on. Okay, so again, using that zigzag stitch. And word of warning, you do not want to stretch the elastic as you're sewing it. You can hold it a little taut, but don't stretch it because then your seam will gather up, okay? We're just looking to stabilize. Not create a shirred look. But that is something that you can do with clear elastic in other applications. You could pull it, stretch it real tight as you're sewing, and then it will create a shirred seam. Okay, so that's what it looks like sewn on. And now you can see when you feel it, it's going to be much more stable than without the elastic. So I'll do the other one off camera, but here you can either press your seam allowance open. That'll be a little weird because you have the elastic there. So in that case, if you're going to press it to one side, what I would do is trim down your seam allowances a little bit. Next to your elastic. And then you're going to press them as one to the back of your top. Like so, okay? So there we have a nice stable shoulder seam. I'm going to repeat the elastic on this side, and then we'll come back and, believe it or not, it's time for our sleeves. Okay, so we're ready to work on our sleeve. So if you're used to sewing wovens, you may be surprised that we are not sewing the side seams first. We're going to insert the sleeves without the side seams sewn. And that is because it's much easier to do it flat this way because we're going to be able to stretch the fabric and maneuver it a little bit. So we don't have to set it in the round, which is kind of nice. So just to review, a sleeve will always have one notch at the top, and that aligns with the shoulder seam, one at the front of the sleeve, and two notches at the back of the sleeve. And there are corresponding notches on the top pieces. So here's how these pieces are going to go together. You can see I laid the top out flat. This is the front, that's the back. Here are my shoulder seams that I just sewed. I'm going to take one sleeve, I'm going to put it right sides together. I'm going to start by matching the shoulder seam to the notch at the top of the sleeve. And I'm going to put a pin there. And then I'm going to match the single notch at the front of the sleeve that matches the front of the top, and then the double notch that matches the top back. And I'll put another pin at the underarm here. And you can pin all the way around if you like. I find it sometimes easier to just match these as we're sewing because the sleeve is really curved and the arm side is curved in the opposite direction, so it can be a little easier to just match it as you're sewing. Okay, so matching at the front underarm here, and now we're ready to sew. So again, this is a 2.5 millimeter wide by 2.5 millimeter long zigzag stitch. We're starting at one underarm at 5/8 of an inch. And it gets very curvy here, so take your time. Okay, so I'm coming up to my double notch in the back. And here's the area I left unpinned. So here I'm just going to, as I stitch, match up those two raw edges. And now I'm coming up to my shoulder seam, so just make sure that your shoulder seam stays pressed to the back. It might try to come unpressed as you're stitching. So again, I'm just, as I go, taking both layers and matching up the raw edges. Here is my single notch at the top front. And now I'm back stitching. Okay, so there's my sleeve sewn in. If I flip it this way, I'm just going to check to make sure I didn't get any puckers or anything, and that's looking really nice. So I'm just going to do one side, and then I'll do the other side off camera. But what I would recommend is trimming these seam allowances down. About 1/4 inch is fine. If you do have a serger and you like to use it for knits, it's not necessary at all, and I'm not going to serge mine, but you can serge the seam allowances together here. So one of the reasons I really wanted to write this book about knits is because I feel like the vintage way of sewing knits is so much less fussy than the modern way of doing it, right? Vintage knits are sewn with a straight stitch usually. They don't, there were no home sergers, no home cover stitch machines, and even, commercially produced knit clothing often had very simple finishes. And I think it's really nice to return to the simplicity of that, especially because people can be very intimidated by knits, but they still love to wear them. So I really believe in simplifying the way that we sew knits. Okay, so there it is, trimmed down. The seam allowance can get pressed to the sleeve, or you can just finger press it. And now, in the next step, I'm going to start a new chapter. We're going to be moving on to sewing the side seam from the hem all the way up to the underarm of the sleeve. Okay, so here we have our top with the sleeves set in, but the side seams are still open. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put it right sides together, like so. And we're going to pin starting at our sleeve hem. We're going to match the sleeve underarm seams, and I like my seam allowances to be oriented towards the sleeve. There are notches for you to match on the top side seam. So there's a notch on the back that matches the front dart if you sewed the version with the front dart. That's the F through H cups. A lot of knits don't have darts, and sometimes that can create a not so optimal fit in larger bust sizes. So we always like to add a dart in our F through H knits, just to give a little more cup room and reduce any pulling, stretching at the bust. Okay, this is your hip curve here. And so like I said, we're going to be stitching this in one continuous seam. The sleeve, underarm, all the way down to the hem of the top. Now, if you're unsure about the fit, you could base this seam first, and I would do that with a long straight stitch just because it's the easiest to pull out. So you do a long straight stitch, 4 or 5 millimeters long at 5/8 of an inch. Try the top on, see if you need to take it in, let it out at all, especially if you used a knit that's a different stretch percentage than what we recommend. So you would baste first, try it on, and then make any adjustments. I'm going to go ahead and sew mine. Again, 2.5 millimeters wide by 2.5 long on that zigzag stitch. And the back stitch at the beginning. When I get to the underarm, again, just making sure that my seam allowances stay pressed towards the sleeve. They can try to move underneath the presser foot. And if you may be someone who doesn't even have a zigzag on your machine, and that's totally fine. You can do this with a straight stitch. The only thing with a straight stitch is that you need to stretch the seams as you're sewing. So you kind of pull it like this, and even a little from the back. And that will build stretch into your seams so that when they relax, they can expand again. So I have sewn all sorts of knits with a straight stitch on my industrial machine, which only has a straight stitch. And if you're into this book, you may be someone who sews on vintage machines, which don't have zigzag stitches a lot of the time. So I promise you it is possible to sew knits with a straight stitch. Just make sure you're building the stretch into the seam. Back stitching there. Okay, I'm going to press this open. You can also press the seam to one side, to the back if you prefer. Okay, so there is one side seam sewn. Look at that. So I'm going to be doing the other one off camera. I'm going to do this side off camera, and then we will come back and we'll do our neckband. Now we're ready to work on the neckband, and I'm really excited we're doing this because this is a great knits skill building exercise. If you look at any knit top you own, it probably has some sort of band, t-shirt, sweatshirt, whatever it may be, it probably has a band. It might be ribbed or it might be the same fabric as the top itself, but it's a really common neck finish for knits. You can also do it at the waist for like a cute little rockabilly look, but bands are really common in knits. So we're gonna learn how to do them. So look at your pattern piece. You're gonna see 3 sets of notches. This one is your center front. These 2 go to your shoulder seams. And then we're going to seam it at the center back, and that will align with the center back notch that you made. Okay, so you can put your pattern piece to the side, grab the actual fabric piece. We are going to sew this into a ring. So put the short ends together, right sides together. And now we're going to stitch this short end using a zigzag stitch at 5/8 of an inch. Okay, so we're sewn into a ring here. If you like, you can trim down these seam allowances. It's kind of nice to just remove bulk wherever you can. And then you can press the seam allowances open. go. And now we are going to fold this piece in half along that marked fold line with the wrong sides together. Okay, so the right sides are now going to be on the outside. So matching the raw edges. And if you like, you can baste these raw edges together just so that they're easy to work with in the next step. But here's what we're going to do. We are going to pin this at our 4 quadrant points. Side seam, center front, center back. And remember, we have notches and the center back seam to help us match all of that. So I'm going to match up the center front notch on the band to the center front notch on the shirt. I'm going to take the side seam notch and match it up to, not the side seam, the shoulder seam. I'm sorry, I was saying side seam. The shoulder seam notch to the shoulder seam on the top. Center back seam on the band gets matched up to that little center back notch we made in an earlier chapter. And then our second shoulder seam notch matches the opposite shoulder seam. Okay, so it's only pinned at 4 places. And you don't need to pin the rest of it because we're going to be matching it as we sew. So let's start at the center back where the seam on the neckband is. We're going to be using a zigzag stitch, 2.5 by 2.5. And I'm just going to get it started at center back. And now we're going to kind of stretch or hold taut the neckband and the top to get the raw edges to match. You're sewing a curve, the neckline, to a straight edge, the band. So it helps to just kind of match them up as you go and hold them a little taut here. Okay. So you can see that I'm using the free arm of my machine here so that I can sew in the round. But if you don't have a free arm on your machine, like you're using an industrial, which I use a lot, then you're going to be sewing from the inside of the round. Okay, so it would just be flipped over and you'd be sewing from the top side, not from the band side. So same thing as I go around. I'm just going to keep pausing, maneuvering, matching those raw edges. And this is a great skill for this sort of quadrant matching, is a great skill for all sorts of sewing. It's often used with elastic, like say the elastic waistband on a pair of panties that you have to sort of divide the elastic into quadrants and match it to the garment. So if you keep sewing and you keep sewing a lot of knits, this will come up again. Okay, so now I'm back to center back, and I'm going to back stitch and overlap my stitching. And I'm just going to make sure that I didn't catch any folds or anything into my band. But that's what it looks like. And now I'm going to take it to the table. I'm going to work from the wrong side here. And I'm going to trim down these seam allowances, being very careful not to actually cut into my top or my band. You can trim these down to 1/4 inch. And if you have a serger, and this sort of thing bothers you, these sort of free seam allowances on top of each other, then you can serge these seam allowances together if you like. Or if you don't have a serger and they bother you, one thing you can do is finish them as one with a wide zigzag. I'm not very bothered, so I'm going to leave them as is. Okay, and these seam allowances will naturally get pressed down towards the top as it's worn. So that's your neckband. I will say, if another thing you can do finishing wise, which you'll sometimes see on knits, is to do a little row of top stitching to hold the seam allowances in place with a zigzag or not, but be careful with that because that will keep your neckline from stretching as much. And this to me is a really nice, simple finish. Okay, so we only have one step left, which is the hems. Okay, so the only thing left for us to do is to hem the sleeves and the hem of the top itself. So it's the same method for the sleeves and the top. So I will just show you maybe the sleeves. So I'm going to see if this is called a seam roll. I have a matching one to my ham. So as you can see, I put the sleeve around the seam roll and I'm turning up the hem to the wrong side of the top. And I'm going to take my little seam gauge here to make sure that I am pressing it up exactly 5/8 of an inch. So you just slide this little guy to 5/8 of an inch and then you can check. And you can press this, but it probably won't stay in this fabric, so I'm going to pin. I'm going to do this all the way around. So all of our hem allowances on the knit patterns are 5/8 of an inch. So we're going to press up 5/8 of an inch, or pin up 5/8 of an inch, I guess. And then we're going to stitch it at 1/2 inch. And we're going to be using a different stitch here, so pay attention. Okay, so on any stitch that's going to be showing from the right side of the garment, I actually like to stitch from the right side. So this is called top stitching. And any top stitching that I do on a knit garment, I change my stitch width a little. I'm going to make it narrower, so it's 1.5 millimeters wide by 2.5 long. And that just looks a little more elegant, I think, on a hem where it's showing. Okay, so I'm going to start at the underarm, and I have a 1/2 inch seam allowance here. And the back stitch. And I'm stitching all the way around with that 1/2 inch seam allowance. And there we go, there's one sleeve hemmed. As you can see, I caught the hem on the inside. Now, with top stitching like this, I always like to give it a flat press. See how it's like just a little ripply here? Just a little press here will make it much flatter and neater. Okay, Okay, so there is one sleeve hemmed. I'm going to do the same thing on the other sleeve and on the bottom of the top. Just fold up 5/8 of an inch, top stitch at 1/2 an inch. All right, and then your top is done. I did want to give one more little tip, which is that if you're kind of trying to progress in your knit sewing, a nice way to do hems is with a twin needle. I did write about this in the book. That will give you 2 lines of straight stitching on the front of the garment, on the right side of the garment, which kind of mimics the look of a cover stitch. And then on the wrong side, it'll be a zigzag, okay? But it will still stretch, which is great. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish my top, and you do the same, and then we are done. Thanks for watching. Okay, everyone, that is it, your jewel neck top. I hope you see how fun and easy sewing knits can be. I hope you enjoyed the new book, and just so you know, there'll be a separate video on sewing the pencil skirt pattern from the book. And you should know that I also have a Patreon where we just released another top, a cross neck top that's really gorgeous, and it's interchangeable with these patterns as well. We have an amazing community on Patreon, and we release a full-length video and 1 to 2 patterns every single month. So I hope that you will come join me there. See you next time. Goodbye.